Hey, hi all. Welcome back to BRR Knowledge Center. So, in today's session, we're going to talk about the aggregate pattern, right, as part of microservices, how it is going to helpful for microservices architecture, and then how we are going to implement a aggregate pattern instead of microservices. Okay. So, an aggregate pattern is an important statistical concept in many areas because that relays or proves that consolidated response is giving boost up for individual microservice hits. So, based on the requirement or tendencies of a subgroup of consistently right behaving in certain way, it is one of the way to implement a composite pattern or aggregate pattern. So, it is particularly useful when you want to hit two different services from one service that may be API gateway or any microservice. Okay, so the service aggregate, right? The design pattern is a kind of pattern using in microservices, right? Which will receive a request from the client, right, or any API gateway, and then dispatches the request of multiple background microservices, and then combines the results and respond back to the initiating request in a one response structure. That's what the aggregate pattern. So aggregate pattern, right? Let me down this. So aggregate a pattern is receives right a request from the client or API gateway, right, and then dispatches request request of multiple internal backend microservices and then combines the results and responds back to the initiating right request in one response. That is what the important of right aggregate pattern. In simple way, example. So I'm the user, right? So let me tell you this way. So I'm user, right? I'm coming from API gateway to access different backend services, right? Service one, service two, service three, service four. So like that, I have right n number of services in backend. Each service is going to do right its own functionality, right? So now what I want is let us look an example, right? Uh, like I have these many services. That's fine. Okay. So which will receive a request via API gateway. Okay. So, and then it makes individual requests via API gateway or via the aggregate pattern. Okay. So it invokes other services to fetch the information. This aggregate pattern response combines into single one and sent back to the consumer or a client. So, so an example of the aggregate pattern in microservices is when a new service is created to consume other services and send a response to consumer, right? The new service receives a request from the consumer, invoke other services to fetch information, aggregates the responses from other services, send the response to the consumer. Okay. The benefits of this aggregate pattern is right simplifies the consumer code, improve performance, reduce the number of requests. Okay. Let me tell you that user is requesting endpoint right of this one endpoint one right and the fourth service right endpoint four. User wants a result from these service one and service four. So generally, he has to make individual requests to service one and service four. But in place of making individual requests, if I have aggregate pattern, right, instead of API gateway or any service, in this case, aggregate pattern, I'm going to, assuming it would be in API gateway, which will take the request from user, like service one, service four, and from the aggregate pattern, it hits to the individual request. So that user feels that only one hit is making, but from the API gateway, it is going to the relevant microservices and get the response and combine them, and again it sends single response back to user. So at the end or outer level, the user feels that he's always making one request, he's always getting one response. So that's what the intention actually. Okay, got it. So the benefits of this aggregate pattern is, right, when we talk about benefits, the first one is simplifies consumer code. Simplifies consumer code. That means the aggregate pattern centralizes request handling aspects, which can simplify the code for consumer because he's always making single request to the API gateway. Second thing is improves performance. How the performance is improving means the aggregate pattern can optimize calls, right? So in this case, he has to make two calls, but using aggregate pattern, he makes only one call. That's how it is improving performance. Next one is reduces the number of requests. Reduces the number of requests, right? That means instead of making multiple requests to the multiple services, he always make one request to API gateway, right? And that API gateway, wherein it is having aggregate pattern, takes care of, right, the the uh, other aspects like getting multiple services and combined response and sent back to the user. Okay, so the aggregate pattern act as a single point of contact, which in it definitely reduce the number of requests made by the client. So these are the wonderful benefits having the aggregate pattern instead of microservices. So then it basically receives a request as like normal request, normal services are taking. Then it makes requests of multiple services. Here, service one and service four. Two requests he is making from this aggregate pattern instead of API gateway, right? And combines the result into single one and then respond back to the initiating request, that is user. So for this, what I'm going to explain here is, right? So uh, practical example, right? Practical example is, so I have a service, right? That service is localhost v78 svc user. This is the API. Inside of that, I have, right, user service, which will give all staff details. This is the output which I'm going to get it, right? Also, I have another service, right? V78 svc API user. I wanted to get specific user details, right? I'm going to pass user day ID. So this gives me, right, some test, right, user data. So these two request data, I wanted to combine, right, and give in one request. Instead of making multiple requests, multiple endpoints, I wanted to make one request, and with aggregate pattern, I wanted to get all the relevant microservices data and combine into single response. So for this, how I'm going to do this? Let me go back to Visual Studio and see that how I'm going to implement this particular endpoint inside of microservice. In this case, I'll take only one microservice. I mean, the login microservice. That's where I wanted to put the stuff, right? So inside of this, I'm going to create the aggregate pattern, right? Aggregate pattern details. Okay. So what I'll do is, so I'll have to put some structure in it because when I say aggregate pattern, it must, allow accepting multiple right endpoints, right? For that reason, I'm going to build a class here that you can build it, as a separate class if you want. Let me build a separate class if that is the case. Solution explorer. Okay, add a new item. So I can say this is aggregate, CLS aggregate. Now in this class, what I'm going to do is, right, aggregate request dot CLS something, you make it whatever way you are making this request. CLS aggregate, right? This is what my class I'm going to create it. Or I can change this as endpoint request, right? So let me do this. Where is that? Endpoint request. This is my class name. I'm basically having it. So this basically going to have, one is service name, right? This should be string. So I can say this as public string, right? Service, which is something takes and gives back. Set and get, setter or getter functions, right? Similarly, I'm going to have endpoint, that also string, right? Endpoint, get, set, okay. And other one is parameters. So I may pass multiple parameters, hence I'm declaring this as dictionary of string and string, because parameter, right? The value hence both are strings. I'm making as name parameters, get, set. Okay, these three are the values I'm going to pass it. Okay, and also I'm going to declare one more key which will differentiate, right? Appropriate response belongs to appropriate service. Hence, I'm making this as a result, get, set. This is the skeleton of my endpoint request. Okay, this is the request coming from user. Basically, I'm going to convert into JSON. So JSON is basically having service, endpoint, parameter, or result. Okay. In other way, if you want to me tell that right now, this could be like in this way. So let me make this as comment uh, here. So this is going to come as like, JSON, right? I said in this way, service, right? Colon, service name, and this is endpoint, colon, endpoint name you are going to give it. And next one is parameters. If any parameters you are going to provide, this again come as array, because you may pass multiple parameters, right? Hence, I can say param1 and param2, like that. Okay, now I'm going to close this chapter. Okay, and next one is a result I'm seeing. So this is going to have a name to differentiate your response. And finally, this is what my syntax of my request. This way I'm going to pass the request to the aggregate pattern. Hence I define the structure here. Got it? I think you understood what I'm saying. Now I'm going to create one more class, aggregate public class aggregate request. So here I'm just defining a method, endpoint request. Request is the variable I'm defining it. That's all. This is my skeleton. Okay. Now coming to your controller part, right? Here, you try to, add the aggregate pattern method here. Okay. That means how your aggregate method looks like. Okay, so what I'm trying to do is I'm going to add aggregate method, and based on that, I'm going to use this. Okay, so coming back, I'll put this as post because I used to pass the JSON the body, right? And I'll keep that. When the root is right, I can say root of API aggregate, right? User details. This is the root URI defining. I'm going to receive this. Public async task. I'm going to use it. HTTP action result. Okay. And get user. I think it is staff details. Get staff details. Okay. So here I'm going to pass body parameter like aggregate request. Okay. This is my endpoint. So what is it telling? Login did not code alpha the returns. That's okay. Return. So I think we'll implement this. So instead of that, what I'm doing is I'm going to just check request equal to null, right? Or request dot request equal to null, right? Or request dot request any is null, right? Simply return bad request of invalid input or invalid request. Invalid request payload received. Okay, this is just validation I'm keeping here. Request. I think I have to import the class. This class basically from request. Where did I define the class? I define the class here, right? Request. I'll do one thing. I'll take this class and I'll define it here. More requests, right? That's fine. Okay, I think it is fine now. So what is this? Request. Good. So if requests are fine, that means the body is coming fine. Then I'm going to make right individual request, right? First I'll define this client, right? Then I'll take string response message, right? And then response tasks is new dictionary string task HTTP responses. I'll define one parameter, that is service params for right holdings parameters. And now I'll keep try catch. And this catch of EX. Catch of E. Let's up. Exception. Sorry. Okay, so inside of this try, so I'm going to write the actual logic here. So the first thing is I'm loop through all the requests, right? So for each, right, var request, right, in request dot request. As before to that, I need to check whether the requests are right. parameter, first of all, I need to count the parameters and then make a string for parameters. So I just check this first, request dot, where is that request? Wait a minute. This request dot request, if request dot parameters count greater than or equal to 1. So then what I'm going to do is I'm going to loop through again parameters from the parameter perspective and bind it to, right, a params. Okay. So I'm just taking slash and param value, param dot value. Is it okay? Yeah. So after this, loop, and I'm just saying where URI is, right? I'm going to prepare URI object of new URI of, right? My URL is always referring localhost, right? Something SVC is what URI I'm going to give it. Comma. I'm going to take the service, right? So request dot service, okay, slash request dot endpoint, and then close this. And after this, you just say service params. So this is the way of preparing the complete URI here. And then set the content type, right? No headers, client dot, default request header dot, accept dot add of new media type with quality header value of application JSON. What's happening? Client, the client. Okay, client is equal to new HTTP client. So once after this URL is prepared, just place it in responses tasks dictionary request dot result. The result key which I've explained to differentiate the response belongs to what, right? That will take care of the key value here. With that, I just read through all the requests and kept in response task dictionary, right? Now I want to execute this. So using asynchronous programming, parallel programming, I'm just running it when all response tasks dot values. So with that, it is going to execute all services you kept in this dictionary and keep it result into result variable. Now I'm going to define one more dictionary, this time with the string and object, right? Dictionary string object consolidated response we have to send back, right? Is equal to new of dictionary string object, right? With that, I'll look through again the responses where, right? Responses from responses values, right? Response task. I can say response from response tasks. Okay, not values. Response tasks. And read through each response where response equal to response dot value dot result. if, right, response is success status code. If before to this, you just declare object parts result. If response dot is success status code, basically it returns 200, right? If it is not returning 200, then I'm going to assign some different value. But if it returns success code, I'm going to read the result from response dot content read as a string async format. Then that value I'm going to assign it by just converting JSON convert dot deserialize object of a result. If it is not succeeded, right, I'm going to say the else part parts result equal to something went wrong with response dot key. Okay, please contact or please check the request payload. Okay, so now with that, I'm keeping everything in the parsed object. Now I declare consolidated response dictionary of response key of parser result. And then once it is once it is done, then I'm just returning consolidated response. So this is what the final outcome I'm going to return send back to the client. So in the exception block anyway, I just say return internal server exception of EX. That's it. Just to go through this once again, I just defined endpoint, which is going to take a request from body. I'm just checking the request is null. If null, just throwing this way. Otherwise, I'm just creating an object for client to, interacting microservices and prepare a dictionary to keep response tasks. And then all the requests I read and keeping in this response task dictionary. And then pass it as synchronous program that task when all. Once it is executed parallelly, all the responses I wanted to keep in this dictionary. Once I created another dictionary, loop through all the responses and keeping the responses in consolidated response with the key, right? And just build this, succeeded. Let me try to run this. Give me 1 second. So now I ran through this. Let me check this. Now I got aggregate method here, aggregate user details. Let me share you. So this is what the stuff I'm receiving while running this. And this is what aggregate user details we have added. And this is what the requested is expecting. Service, endpoint, parameters, and result. Okay. Now I'll open Postman, right? Before to this, I wanted to check you, right? Some information. So what kind of input I wanted to pass it to this particular, the input object. Thing is, this is what the expected output, expected input I'm going to give it. Okay. So the first service, this one, right? And endpoint is user. For this endpoint, I don't require any parameter, hence passing empty. And a result key I'm naming as all staffs or all staff details. Okay. And other service is user. It requires some parameter. I'm passing user ID and the type of user and test clinician details. I'm saying as key name. Okay. So this is what the input I'm going to give it as per the structure. This is structure of created service, endpoint, parameters, and result. Let me take this, right? First, we'll see like what output it is coming for this particular user. Like when you say this API user, I'm not sure where is the problem. Okay. No, HTTP localhost slash 78 SVC API user review details. So this is giving all the staff details. These are all users returning, right? And other service I'm expecting is something like 104. This is giving a specific user details. I can say this is right test details, test clinician details. Okay. Now let me change this to 5. I think user does not exist, right? And here on R4, I'm going to pass it. Then I'll try only on R4. I want to merge these two and get a consolidated response via this aggregate user details method. Okay. Let me go back to the Postman and see that how it is processing, all right, my aggregate a pattern. Okay. So this is my Postman. I'm going to have it. So I'm just saying the API gateway, right? Sorry, the aggregate method endpoint here, like, API aggregate user details. And the body, I'm going to pass, right? This, JSON, because that's what I'm expecting to, execute. I'm passing this. Okay, so see this is service one and then endpoint one, no parameter or empty. This is the service two, endpoint, and the parameters. The result details are different. Okay, now when I make it, it should give consolidated response back. Okay, let me click on this because it's a post method. Click here and see that. Now you can see all staff details. The first request is processed and kept in all staff details. Okay. And second request is processed and kept in test clinician. You can see here. So this is a second service details. This is first service details since from staff 8 ID. This is a staff 104 which I've passed here. Okay. And even you can give any staff here, right? And that staff is going to return, right? If I give 100 and let's see how it returns a value. Click on this. This is the all staff details and this is the staff 100 details you requested. Okay. This way you will get aggregate, right? Individual microservices response into single response and send back, right? So to achieve this, what we did is we have written this endpoint, right? This is the endpoint I written, which is basically taking input as JSON, and that JSON declaration have been defined here is a structure, and same structure it is expecting to be passed in the body. And based on that, I'm reading through and keeping here and sending results in a single consolidated, right? This is how you're going to implement aggregate pattern or aggregate method inside of microservices for any requirement. This is going to give more performance, right? Also, this is improve a lot of other aspects like consumer code simplification and reducing number of requests to the server. Okay, these are the advantages with this API gateway aggregate pattern. Okay, I hope you understood, right? The aggregate pattern purpose and microservices. Okay, thanks for listening to this video, and please subscribe this channel for more videos. Thank you.